logically, you know it's over, right? You know she's probably not coming back. Your friends and family are telling you that you need to move on, maybe that she isn't even good for you and you don't want her to come back. Like, you don't see any evidence. Maybe she's not talking to you. She won't consider couples counseling. She doesn't seem to want to work on it. She doesn't even seem to be wanting to work on herself. She's not taking responsibility for any of her faults. Like, you know you need to let go and move on, but you can't stop thinking about her, right? And you can't stop like holding on to that little thread of hope that maybe, just maybe, she'll change her mind. She'll realize she made a mistake. She'll want to come back and reconnect with you. And maybe you've tried a lot of different things to let go, right? You've tried distracting yourself. You might have even tried dating, which probably didn't go very well if you're in this stage. Right? You've tried pretending that you're just fine. You've tried pushing your way through it. You've tried talking to her and begging and pleading. You've tried everything. Nothing's working. She's not coming back, but you're also not letting go, right? And a part of you knows that holding on isn't healthy. Right? You know this attachment is keeping you stuck. It's keeping you kind of frozen in this limbo state where you really can't live fully. You don't feel fully alive. But at the same time, you can't let go, right? Another part of you is holding on to all of the what ifs. Like, what if she picks up the phone? Like, what if she calls me? What if she changes her mind? You are not weak if you can't let go, even if all of the signs point to she's never coming back, or it wouldn't even be good for you if she did come back. You're not weak. This is biology. Your brain is wired to bond with her. Right? When love ends suddenly, your nervous system panics. It doesn't understand that she's gone. It just feels danger and fear and loss. And a lot of men really struggle with this. I talk to a lot of guys, and even a lot of my clients, they're like, I've kind of exhausted my friends and family. Like, they don't really want to hear about this anymore. Like, they're telling me to move on. Even my therapist is trying to get me to move on, but I can't let go. And they'll start to doubt themselves. They'll start to judge themselves. Like, what's wrong with me? Like, why am I holding on to this? And this is especially confusing in relationships where there was some abuse, right? There's often a lot of emotional abuse, if not in the marriage itself, then during the divorce process, where she's accusing you of being controlling and abusive and narcissistic and saying horrible things about you and to your friends and family, maybe making you doubt yourself. And so you can see all of these things that she's doing. You can also see the things that she's not doing, right? The not taking personal responsibility, not being willing to work on it with you, not seeking solutions. And so you start to really judge yourself for holding on. You're like, what is wrong with me? Like, why am I still in love with this woman? Why am I still holding on to her? And you might vacillate back and forth between like hating her, being angry at her, like hating that she is just throwing this marriage out like a bag of garbage and like not fighting for you, not fighting for your family, for your kids. But at the same time, you love her, you want her, you miss her, you need her back. And that back and forth between those dramatically different thoughts and feelings about her, you guys, it's exhausting. And it can start to feel like it's just going to rip you apart. So what's really going on here? What's going on is that your emotional brain is bonded to her. You are literally attached to her in several different ways. She has come to represent more than what she actually is. What she represents to you is more than a woman, even more than your wife. She has come to represent home, stability, future, right? You probably have an image for your future life together. Maybe you were planning your retirement and the amazing adventures that you were going to go on now that the kids are grown up and you don't have to work. Maybe you're younger and you were seeing your whole future raising a family together. Like, and now here you are with these young kids, and what are you supposed to do this on your own? Right? She represents more than just her. You might love her, you might have loved her, but what you've lost is a lot more than a woman. It's a lot more even than your wife. It's everything else that she represented to you. And in our modern society, this bond becomes even more painful when it breaks, because it's very possible that she was your primary or even your only relationship. For much of human history, we had a lot more relationships. We lived in extended family groups. We had aunts and uncles and cousins and grandparents around all the time. We lived in smaller communities or tribes where we were close to each other. We knew our neighbors. We helped each other raise our kids, right? And men hunted together. Women worked together. Women raised children together. Like, there were all these other human bonds. But in our modern society, we don't really value those extended relationships anymore. It tends to all focus just on the nuclear family and just on your spouse. They become the person, the relationship, that everything goes to. And so many of my clients say this. They're like, yeah, she was my wife, but she was my best friend. And she was the person I was closest to. Sometimes she's even your business partner. Or she's my wife, my best friend, my business partner. Everything is intertwined with this person. So when you lose her, you don't have this rich network of family and community and other relationships to fall back on. And even if you do have good friends and good family, they're not people who are just in your life all day, every day, like they would have been at other times in human history. And so, and for a human being, we are very, very dependent on other people for our survival. Like a human being alone in the world doesn't do very well, right? Especially for most of human history before all of our modern tools and clothes and all of the things that the resources that we have now that allow us to thrive quite well on our own. If you lost your primary relationships, if you were thrown out of your community, rejected by your tribe, you probably would die, right? How many winters are you going to make by yourself out in the mountains, right? How many summers out in the desert? Probably not very many. So the human brain, especially the more primal parts of our brain, our emotional brain, respond to the loss of primary relationships with the feeling that we aren't going to survive. And it feels like if I lose this relationship, I will die. And that's often how divorce feels to a lot of men. They're like, wow, this is so painful. Like, I feel like I'm not going to survive losing her. Part of the intensity of that feeling is because she is your only primary relationship and you've lost it. And for much of human history, again, being rejected by those primary relationships was a death sentence. But it's also more than that. It's not just about those primal processes. There's also a childhood trauma element or attachment element at play. So I want you guys to take a deep breath with me. Big inhale, big exhale. Settle down in your chair and just think for a moment about what abandonment really is. It's a word that we use a lot with divorce. She abandoned me. I feel abandoned in this divorce process. What does abandonment really mean? There was a psychologist I heard speak years ago, and I cannot remember his name, but there was one slide in his presentation that really stuck with me. He said, abandonment means if you leave me, I will die. Right? And he said, children get abandoned, adults get left. Because there is this crucial difference between when we're children and when we're grown up. When we're kids, we are dependent, like literally, especially as infants and small children. We can't feed ourselves. We can't take care of ourselves. Baby can't even walk or go to the bathroom without help, right? Like we are so dependent. We will literally die if we are left alone when we're children. But as we grow up, that's no longer true. Like you will not die because your wife left. Like you will eat today. You will have a roof over your head, right? You will go to work. You will pay your bills. You will make new connections, new relationships. Your life will go on. If you were a child, that's not true. Mom leaves, dad leaves, you're there alone, just the child. If no other adult shows up to help take care of you, you're probably not going to survive. So whenever somebody tells me I feel like the anxiety, the fear, and especially the fear of being alone, if that feeling of being alone is so scary that it feels like you're going to die, that's usually a big signpost, big flag that says, hey, there's a childhood attachment wound here, right? Because what's happening now is triggering a memory, an emotional memory of feeling abandoned or rejected as a child. When you were a child, it was true that if you were abandoned, you would die. So that I'm going to die response, the size of that emotional response makes a lot of sense. And one of the things that's a hallmark of trauma, anything that's traumatic is something that stays present with us. So trauma doesn't always have to be a big, massive thing like child neglect or sexual assault. It can be, those events can be traumatic, but smaller things can be traumatic too. So for example, if you're, I had one client, for example, who his mother had another child and the birth was really awful and she almost died. And she was in the hospital for a few days and she almost died having this other baby. And he was like 4 years old. And that 4-year-old, all he knew was like mom was in the hospital and she was really sick and she was maybe going to die. And that was a really scary abandonment event for that child. Right? No fault of moms or dads, right? Like they weren't intentionally abandoning this child. There was no abuse happening. But for that 4-year-old, mom is bleeding and in the hospital and maybe not going to make it, and dad's freaking out, feels like, oh my gosh, I might lose my caregivers. And if that happens to me at 4 years old, guess what? I'm probably going to die. If your wife leaves and you feel the same way you felt when you were 4 years old and your mom was in the hospital, that's a sign that there was a trauma in your past, because the brain now sees the hallmark of trauma is that when something similar happens, right, you're being left again, left alone again, it reminds the brain of that traumatic moment, and you experience the emotions of that past memory as though it was happening now, right? So now your wife leaves, you're not going to die. If she never comes back, you're not going to die. But you have the emotional response of the 4-year-old who would have died if mom never came back. Right? So when the emotional response doesn't quite make sense, like when it's a little bit disproportionate to what's actually happening, when you look at it and you're like, whoa, 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 back up. I'm an adult. She left. It sucks. Right? There's a lot that's hard in my life about it. Like there's a lot that I don't want. There's a lot of grief, but being alone feels like I'm going to die. That doesn't add up. That's not true. I'm not going to die if I'm alone. I'm a grown man. Like, I'm going to be all right. Why do I feel this? There's nothing wrong with you. Right? It's not a weakness. It's not something that's bad inside of you. It is a sign that there's an emotional wound from earlier in your life that hasn't been healed yet. Right? And so we need to start to pay attention. Instead of discounting that pain or trying to force our way through it or get over it or wallowing in it and living in it, we need to get really curious. Like, why are you feeling like this? Where does that actually come from? What is that attachment wound that you've been carrying all of these years? And how do you start to heal that attachment wound? Right? And so when you start to take into consideration that, okay, my limbic system, that primal brain, is programmed to view the loss of a primary relationship as a life-threatening event. Is it in this case? Is it a life-threatening event? No, it isn't. Okay. But I still feel like being alone feels like life and death. Like I can't be alone. All right, well, is there something in my childhood or earlier in my life? Is there an old emotional memory that I'm reliving right now? And it doesn't really matter if you can identify the exact event that happened in childhood. It's enough to recognize that the emotion you're feeling now is a holdover from something that felt traumatic in childhood. It doesn't really matter what the event was. It's enough to recognize that the current emotion doesn't belong to you. It's not coming from your 45-year-old adult self, your 60-year-old adult self. It's an emotional memory that belongs to your 5-year-old self or your 10-year-old self. So as you start to put together these pieces of the puzzle, what you'll start to recognize if you step back is that all of this holding on behavior you're doing, like the replaying your old conversations with her, having imaginary conversations that you wish you could have with her, reading old texts, scrolling through photos, like you're not doing this to torture yourself, holding on to something that's not coming back. You're trying to calm your nervous system. You're trying to self-soothe by reassuring yourself that maybe there's a chance you're not being abandoned. Right? You're trying to reattach to the thing, to the person that made you feel safe. Right? So there's nothing there to be ashamed of. But when we can observe what's actually happening, why you're doing what you're doing, it starts to give us alternative paths to healing. Right? So letting go, it's not about like forgetting her or like getting her out of your system. You actually have to reconnect to yourself. You have to start to heal those attachment wounds and find safety being alone here in your adult self. Right? You have to help the traumatized parts of your brain realize that you are not a 4-year-old child who's about to starve because his parents never come home from the hospital. Right? To realize that you are a grown man and you're going to be okay. But we can't just make that shift overnight, and you can't just make that shift in your logical brain. Right? Understanding that, like you're getting from this video, that's helpful. But you have to teach that to your emotional brain. The emotional brain needs to learn how to believe what your logical brain now knows. Because to the emotional brain, all it knows is she left, she was safety, she was my primary person. I don't think I'm going to make it without her. So even as I'm talking about this, you might notice a disconnect between what you know, what you're understanding that I'm saying, and how you're feeling. Like as we're talking about this, you might feel a little better, but I bet you that deep-seated, like, oh gosh, I might die here alone, hasn't really shifted, right? And that's because insight's not enough. We've got to get the emotional brain, we have to retrain the emotional brain, teach it that you're no longer in that helpless position of the 4-year-old child. We have to help it recognize that the loss of this primary relationship doesn't mean you're going to starve to death in the winter alone, right? We've got to grow up and modernize the emotional brain, and that's going to take some concrete tools and practices. So I'd like to invite you to come with me into my free masterclass, How to Take Back Control of Your Life After Divorce, because in that masterclass, I teach you a strategy called limbic awareness. And limbic awareness is how we take this insight of what's happening intellectually and put it into the emotional brain. It's how we bring the emotional brain along for this transformation. It's almost like, you guys have probably felt this, right? Like there's two parts of you. There's the part that's like, I know I need to move on, and I know I'm going to be okay, and I know I need to get through this. And then there's this emotional part that's like, I can't live without her, and we've got to get her back. It's like there's two of you, and they're pushing and pulling against each other all the time. Limbic awareness is how we get this emotional part to come along with the logical part, so that all of you can say, yes, okay, I'm safe. I can move forward. It's all right for me to let go and heal. Limbic awareness is the way to do that. It's a little bit of an involved process to actually practice it effectively. It's not enough to just understand. So please come with me into the masterclass. It's completely free. And I will walk you through that strategy, how it works, and what the next steps are for you to start actually letting go in a way that works for your biology and respects what's actually going on in the attachment inside of your brain. Because this is not just like a mental and emotional issue that you're having. It is not a weakness in you. It is a very physical attachment bond created through the primal parts of your brain and also childhood patterns that you're reliving. So we need to rewire all of that. And in the masterclass, I will show you how to do that. So I look forward to seeing you there. Come with me into that class and we'll take that next step together. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the masterclass. Does finding a partner make you feel better? Or do you need to feel better before you can find a partner?
Gotta feel better. Yeah, I think we all agree with the feel better. Love yourself first. You're not going to love anybody else.
That's very.
Yeah, I think that's very obvious to the opposite sex when you're not good with yourself. Yeah, I think that's certainly feel better first.
Feel better first.